Bonjour, French students. Here is some information about Lesson 12A from pages 174 and 175 in your textbook. We're going to start with a little review about adjectives again. An adjective is defined as a word or phrase naming an attribute, added to or grammatically related to a noun to modify or describe it. So what that means is an adjective is a word that describes an animal, person, thing, or thought. An adjective includes words that describe what something looks like and what it feels like to touch, taste, or smell it. And an adjective can also be colors or words that describe temperatures and sizes, okay? So this is just, again, reviewing for you adjectives. So, again, there's lots and lots of different adjectives in French and in English. But, for example, some of the adjectives that you have learned in French, okay? You've learned, like, the adjective for intelligent. You've learned the adjective for cute. You've learned the adjective for athletic. You've learned the adjective for interesting. Okay, so remember that you have learned these adjectives, okay? So you've learned some adjectives already. There actually are lists of adjectives in your book that you've already learned on page 139 for the physical description of people. Those were the adjectives that were on page 139. Okay, those were those physical descriptions ones. So it was where the girl was thinking about the boy, and it was grand, petit, brun, blond, beau, and jeune. And where the boy was thinking about the girl, and we had grande, petite, brune, blonde, belle, jolie, and jeune. So those were the adjectives that were on page 139. Okay. On page 165, you had some more adjectives that typically are used to describe people, right? Those were the adjectives amusant, intelligent, intéressant, méchant, bête, sympathique, timide, gentil, mignon, and sportif. Okay, so those adjectives were on page 165. And then on page 167 in your book, you have adjectives for nationalities. Those were the adjectives américain, mexicain, français, anglais, espagnol, suisse, italien, canadien, japonais, and chinois. Now, remember, French adjectives, there's a little bit more to them because French nouns have gender and number, okay? And again, just remember here, when we talk about gender, we're talking about whether the noun is masculine or feminine. And when we talk about, okay, number, remember we're talking about singular or plural. Okay, so those are kind of the things that we're talking about here. So because French nouns have gender and number, French adjectives must agree in gender and number with the noun they describe. The other thing we've learned already is that in French, the adjective comes after the noun it describes. All right, so remember there are some clues that your noun is masculine. You're going to be looking for an en, a le, a tone, a mon, a son. Clues that your noun is feminine, you're going to look for an un, a la, a ma, a ta, a sa. And clues that your noun is plural, you're going to should see that your noun itself ends in an S. And you should see articles like day and lay. So, for example with that, okay, we might have une fille. And even if I can't remember what the word fille means, because I have this une here, I know that fille is feminine. Versus, oops, sorry about that. Okay. Des filles. Again, notice our noun itself ends in an S, and we have this article of day, and so we know that this noun is plural. We don't know if it's masculine or feminine unless we have learned our adjective or our vocabulary properly with the uns and the uns. So remember, we sort of made a chart about regular adjectives, and in this chart we kind of put, okay, an X here, because remember, this is the form that we see in a dictionary. They give us the masculine singular form. This is the form that's in a glossary. This is the form that they give us in our textbook. Okay? So they're always going to give you that masculine singular form of the adjective. Okay? What do we do to that masculine singular adjective to make it plural? Remember, we're going to add an S to our adjective. And there is an exception to that, except if the adjective already ends in S. So what we're basically saying there is we don't add an extra S to make it plural. So if we happen to be dealing with an adjective like français that already in the masculine singular form already ends in an S, it's going to be the same singular and plural for masculine. All right, to that masculine singular adjective to make it feminine, we add an E. And again, there's an except for that, except if our adjective already ends in E. So again, an example of that is timide. Timide, which means shy, ends in an E in the masculine singular form. So timide is spelled the same way in the masculine singular and feminine singular form because it already ends in an E. And again, what do we do to that masculine singular adjective to make it feminine and plural? We're going to add an ES. All right, about the format of our adjectives, remember our format's a little bit different, and we just talked about that here. We said that in French our adjective comes after the noun. So our format in French of a noun with an adjective is that we're going to have our article, our noun itself, and then our adjective. So if we kind of go back to that example, and let's say I'm going to use day fee here. Okay, so my article is day, my noun is fee, and again, I know that my adjective is going to have to be plural because day is plural. I know it's going to have to be feminine because you have learned the vocabulary for fee, and fee is the word for a girl, so it's feminine. So I know my adjective is going to have to be feminine and plural. So let's say that these are some English girls. Okay. So then my adjective for English, the masculine singular form is anglais. And then to make this feminine and plural, I have to add an ES. So again, this ES is because these words here, day fee, is feminine and plural. So that's a little review of adjectives that you've learned so far. Today we're talking about les couleurs. Note the form and position of the color words in the following sentences. Alice a un vélo bleu. Nous avons des chemises bleues. So, a couple things here to notice, right? First off, notice this is that format that we just talked about, right? We have our article, we have our noun, and then we have our adjective. We can tell that this noun is masculine even if I don't remember what this noun means because it has an un, and bleu here is masculine as well. Notice the second example, same thing, right? The day is our article. The chemise is our noun, and the bleu is our adjective. Now again, even though des chemises isn't a word you've learned before, you should know something about it. Because look at bleu, it ends in an es. Remember, that's telling me that this word des chemises is feminine and plural. So even though you haven't learned the word for shirt before, you can tell from this adjective that it's feminine and plural. Okay. So, names of colors are adjectives and take adjective endings. They come after the noun, right? So that's what we just talked about here. These are these adjective endings. That's what we talked about in this box here. And this part here about the fact that they come after the noun they describe. So, s'il vous plaît, répétez de quelle couleur, de quelle couleur, de quelle couleur est la moto? Elle est rouge. So, think about what that question's asking, right? It's asking, what color is the motorcycle? And we're saying it is red. Remember, we're using L here because la moto is feminine. And if I want to replace a feminine noun, I have to use L, right? If I'm replacing a masculine noun, then I'm going to use il for it. So we see the colors here. S'il vous plaît, répétez. And remember, underneath here, the second kind of, the ones that are in parentheses are all the feminine forms of these adjectives, of these colors. S'il vous plaît, répétez blanc, blanche, noir, noir, bleu, bleu, rouge, rouge, jaune, jaune, vert, verte, gris, gris, marron, marron, orange, orange, rose, rose. The colors orange and marron are invariable. They do not take any endings. So what that means is that they don't do what we just talked about adding the S or the E or the ES to them. Okay, so notice here, un sac orange. Un sac is masculine and singular. Des sacs orange, now this is masculine and plural, but notice our orange didn't get an S on it. Un t-shirt, masculine and singular. Okay, une chemise, feminine and singular. And notice marron is the same both ways. So, here are the adjectives of color. Again, all that's really new here are the adjectives themselves. The endings that they take, with the exception of brown and orange, do this. The format of where they go, the same as what we've already learned. They're just new adjectives. So your homework is on page 175, exercise 3. We'll take a look at that. So it's l'Arche de Noah. This is going to be an écrire for you because you're going to write it. Noah's Ark has just landed. Give the colors of the animals as they get off the ship. Look at the example, le chien. So le chien, you've learned that vocabulary before. It's dog. And so we see the picture of the dog, and the dog is white. So le chien est blanc. So the only part of this that's going to stay the same every time is the A. Here, you're going to put whatever you see here. This part, you're going to use one of these colors that we learned over here, and you have to make it agree. Okay? So, looking at these, right, remember if we see a L, that means that our noun is masculine. If we see a la, it tells us that the noun is feminine. Okay, and look at l'éléphant, the M behind it, that's telling you that that noun is masculine. So let's look at, say, number 3. So we have our sentence that we're going to write is going to be La panthère est. Now, notice, right, the la is telling me that this noun is feminine and singular. So, I see the panther, it's black. So the noun for black is N-O-I-R, noir. That's the masculine singular, but we just said this had to be feminine, so we're going to add that E. So again, you're going to write out those 8 sentences for these animals. Au revoir, à demain.